Good Wednesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Myles Garrett requested a trade from the Browns earlier in the week. Today, down at the Super Bowl in New Orleans, Louisiana, his first interview. It was on Press Row with Rich Eisen of The Rich Eisen Show. And Eisen asked Myles Garrett the question that's on all Browns fans' minds.
Why, when it all comes down to it, that you're willing to share? Do you feel that this is what's best, that your 8 years you've come to the conclusion it just won't be in Cleveland for you?
I mean, like you said, it's not a decision I take lightly. It took time and lots of conversation, but just looking at kind of the trajectory of the team, talking to some of the higher ups, and I have a lot of respect for them, but I just don't think we're aligned on where the team is going in the near future. And I feel like the window for us as athletes is only so broad, and it only continues to close as years go by with anything be able to happen on that field from day to day. And I want to be able to go out there and compete at the highest levels, day in and day out, and playing for champions, like I said.
And this came out of conversations that you had with management.
Yes, sir.
Already. You've already had those conversations with management.
Yes. I mean, we spoke after the season with the exit meeting, and then spoke a few other times further down the line. So this wasn't something that I blindsided them with my opinion. I took my time before stating it outright to them, and then I released a statement. But I wanted to be able to do right by them, because they've taken care of me for a long time. Cleveland has been my second home, and this community is one that I love. But this opinion is just how I feel now.
So also from that same interview, Rich Eisen asked Garrett how he arrived at the decision to request a trade, as well as who he consulted.
It's never been about the Hall of Fame for me. It's not about money or records. It's all you remember for winning. Bringing a trophy back home to your city, whichever city that is. That's how you remember in your community, by your peers, your teammates, by friends, all of that. And we want to play the game and want to do things to be remembered.
So, if you don't mind me prying, who is in that inner circle with whom you had this conversation in your family? Who was it?
Oh, I mean, it was my parents. My sister, obviously my agent, my marketing agent as well, and hearing a little bit from a Cleveland or Akron native as well.
You did reach out to LeBron.
Yes, sir.
What conversation did you have with him, if you're willing to share in that?
Just kind of what a transition looked like for him. What was his thought process going into it before he left Cleveland. And just making sure I made a logical decision, taking my time, and just trying to take away the pressure of doing something like that. I know that Cleveland, really that area, Northeast Ohio, has been his home, and it's really been it feels like my home as well.
It's your adopted home.
So to connect the dots, Garrett's now represented by Clutch Sports, that Rich Paul, LeBron's agency. So that's why the check-in with LeBron, if you will, for Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett's trade request starting to sink in a little bit for Browns fans. Former Falcons general manager Thomas Dimitroff on what a general manager like Andrew Berry is going through right now.
I think the first thing you do is you have to get over that initial shock of someone like that important to the organization. We all know, and I love Andrew Berry. I really think he's really good at what he does. I like Kevin Stefanski. I like the organization. I know they've had a lot of issues there, right? They're dealing with stuff again and again and again. Here's another one that is a major kick in the pants, right? As a GM, the last thing you want to do is deal with like that. That's a pit of your stomach. The initial is, as a GM, probably like, well, go. Ego thing. Screw it then, go. Yeah. And then it's like, no, I'm not saying that. How do we get him to stay? How do we fix this? It seems as though they're not going to fix it. And then I think you have to step back and say, all right, take a deep breath. After the ego goes through all of this, where are we with the financial side? You know that. And the compensation. It could be great compensation for them, right? It could be what, Khalil Mack-ish? Yeah. We're talking two ones 3, maybe even more. You never know. The cap implications are going to be a really big deal for them, as you mentioned. How does he navigate that? That's a complicated.
Again, the cap implications are if they trade him before June 1st, it's a $36 million dead cap hit this year, so not likely. So one guy that is now on the trade market without question is Cooper Kupp. Steelers and Bengals are the early betting favorites to land Cooper Kupp. That comes to us from Pro Football Talk. So Cooper Kupp, wide receiver, could help division rivals to the Browns. We'll have plenty more on Myles Garrett a little bit later in the show. NBA trade deadline is quickly approaching for the Cavs and the rest of the NBA, 3 o'clock tomorrow. Cavs with the league's second best record, considering upgrades. DeAndre Hunter, who is Ty Jerome's best friend, someone that the Cavs almost drafted when he was in the draft a few years ago, is one of their targets. That, according to Chris Fedor. We will continue to monitor the Cavs at the trade deadline, see if they do, in fact, make a deal. We'll also talk a little bit more about the Cavs and the trade deadline coming up a little bit later. Cavs met the Celtics at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse last night. Battle of the two best teams in the Eastern Conference. And really, the Celtics got after it in a hurry and put the Cavs in a big hole early. Jaylen Brown knocks down a field goal, another one. The rebound, he tips it in. Jaylen Brown doing some damage earlier. 16 points, 9 rebounds. Three-pointer knocked down by Derek White. He had 20, was 6 of 12 from three-point range. It just kept coming early. Jason Tatum, a three-ball. The Celtics opened up a big lead. They were up 15 at the end of one and 11 at the end of the first half. Cavs fought back. Donovan Mitchell hits the three-ball, 31 points, was 12 of 15 from the field. And he gets it to Evan Mobley inside. Cavs got as close as 4, but couldn't get no closer. They lose it 112-105. They shot 39% from the field, 28% from three-point range, tying their worst all season. Kenny Atkinson asked about it after the game last night.
I got to give them a lot of credit. I thought they made, even our rim attempts, I felt, Porzingis there at the rim and Cornette, they got great length at the rim. Top 2 in the league in rim protection, so, made our rim shots tough. and then our threes, I didn't feel like, a lot of them, I felt like were self-generated instead of, and they do a good job, right, with their rim protection. They stay home with shooters, so it's a different style of play. I think it's real credit to their defense. I don't think we had great looks.
Cavs still 4.5 games ahead of the Celtics. Not a lot to be read into that other than the Celtics were better than the Cavs last night. Again, Cavs didn't have a good shooting night. They'll be back at it, will the Cavaliers, tonight in Detroit against the Pistons and former head coach J.B. Bickerstaff. He has the Pistons at 500. 6th place in the Eastern Conference, so Pistons playing well under JB. The Guardians making some news with some minor league contract signings and invites to spring training's big league camp. Vince Velasquez will be signed to a minor league deal, an invite to major league spring training. Velasquez missed all of last year. He underwent a hybrid Tommy John surgery where had a brace on his pitching elbow. He was pitching really well in 2023 with the Pirates, 4-4, 3.86 ERA before he went down with that injury. He's 32 years old. He'll be 33 in June. Again, missed all of last year. Take a look at some of the numbers. So 4-4, 3.86 ERA before he got hurt. Before that, again, 500 record. With a 4.78 ERA, 75 and a third innings pitch. That was with Philadelphia. He was with the Phillies for a few years, 3.9, 6.30 ERA, 94.1. He's always been one of those swing guys, long relief, spot starter, an intriguing guy, a veteran that could potentially help out the Guardians at some point during the season. Former Guardians manager Terry Francona back in the dugout with the Cincinnati Reds, and he explained his decision to return to managing.
I had a nice year being away from the game. It was good for me. And I think when you fess up that you need to be away, you're probably a little late on the pulling the trigger. And then when these guys came out to visit me, I think I told you, this kind of blew me away that they flew out to my house. I mean, I sat in my rocking chair and they sat in my couch, and it was like, it reminded me of my first couple days in Cleveland. And everybody knows how much I love the guys there. And it just felt kind of the same, and it felt good, and it still does. I didn't leave because I was mad or I hated the game. I just didn't feel like I was doing my job right. I worked hard this past year to try to be in a position where I can do it. I know when the season starts, it'll be a test. I'm sure of that. I'm not a spring chicken. In fact, I don't think I've been a spring chicken for quite a few years, but it just feels good. Like it feels good to be excited. I didn't want to jump into something that I wasn't going to be comfortable with because, even on good days, this can be a hard job. But I found myself really early on talking to these guys. I caught myself saying we a few times. And I was like, whoa, slow down there, big fella. But it just felt right.
Terry Francona on agreeing to manage the Cincinnati Reds. Be interesting to see Guardians and Reds games coming up this season. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Plenty ahead to talk about Myles Garrett. We'll hear more from him from the Rich Eisen Show. Tom Withers, straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. We heard earlier from Myles Garrett, his first statements since he requested the trade from the Browns. On the Rich Eisen Show, asked, what if the Browns don't trade him?
We want you to stay. We want you to be part of this thing. We do believe in the plan that we have. We do believe that this plan will work. We do need you to help this plan work, and you do have 2 years left. Like, what if that happens, Myles?
I mean, it's possible. They could do that, but that's a little bit further down the line that I'm willing to look. I know things have changed, night by night, and I'm sure people are calling and hopefully making some tempting offers.
Let's welcome in Tom Withers. Tom, it's kind of interesting. If Garrett wanted more money, it'd be an easy solution. You sign him to a long-term contract. Jimmy Haslam will write the check. I have no doubt to that. This isn't about money. It's not really a contract ploy. How do you make Myles Garrett happy if you're the Browns?
Dave, good to see you. It's a great question. I know Myles always wanted to play in the NBA, and he's certainly sounding like an NBA player these days, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't say that I was totally shocked by the way this has transpired over the last several days. This has been building up since the end of December when when Myles said that he didn't want to be part of another rebuild here in Cleveland, and I guess join the club. None of us really wants to be part of another rebuild here, but here we are. So listen, I don't think this is necessarily an untenable situation. While he can make the request or the demand, however you want to characterize it, the Browns are under no obligation to trade Myles Garrett. He's under contract for 2 more years. I still think, maybe I'm naive here, but I still think there's a way that this can be fixed. I think there's still a way for these parties to find some common ground. Now, obviously, in whatever discussions Myles had with, Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Berry and others in the front office over the last month, he wasn't satisfied with what he heard in terms of the short term, in terms of, what their offseason plans are. That's not to say that things can't change pretty dramatically. We've all been around this team long enough to know that, hold on to your hat because there's another right-hand turn coming up. And I don't think that's anything different with this scenario. Now, there's a lot of things that need to be ironed out, certainly. And, while the Browns have been steadfast in saying that they're not going to entertain offers, well, they'd be crazy not to, because potentially the quickest way to a rebuild here would be to accumulate some assets for, arguably the best defensive player in the league. So quite a week. It's Super Bowl week, and we're talking about the Browns. I guess that's a positive.
Without question. All right. As you might imagine, plenty of fans want to talk about this as well. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave. Love the show. Just want to hear your thoughts on this. So who do we blame for the Myles Garrett wanting out? I say we blame Jimmy Haslam because he didn't do nothing to help his loyal number one pick. You went out and you gave Deshaun Watson guaranteed $231 million. When it's all said and done, we'll be lucky in this 5-year deal if Watson has or even gets close to playing one full season, like total. Instead of all these picks you could have been adding to it and helping Myles want to be here, you didn't do nothing. So I blame that on Jimmy Haslam. But I don't blame Myles. You're not just going to sit around and waste his talent, man, and that's what I feel like is about to happen. So I hope Myles goes where he wants and gets what he wants, but I blame Jimmy Haslam. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Tom, I understand the thought. I don't necessarily agree with it. Without question, the Deshaun Watson contract is kind of why the franchise is where it's at. But they thought they were solving the franchise quarterback situation. So, and I can't hide from it. I thought it was a good move when they did it. If you go back and look at this show, I thought it was a great move. So, but upon further review, that's why we're here. That contract is kind of why we're here.
Yeah, a little bit. I think there's a lot of blame to be shared here, Dave, to be honest. I think, Jimmy Haslam has to take some of that. Deshaun Watson in the contract, although, how could you blame him for taking money that people are going to throw at you? I think Myles has to take a little bit of the blame here as well. I mean, not to say that he hasn't been a great player the last 4 or 5 years, but, he in some regards, maybe he hasn't been the leader that this team had hoped he would be. He does a great job on the field. There's no question about that. He's made a huge impact in the Northeast Ohio community as well, and that's all well and good. But listen, at the end of the day, he signed a contract. He's under that contract for the next 2 years. It's easy to look around the league and say, woe is me. I haven't played for a championship. I'd like to remind Myles that they've been in the playoffs 2 times in the last 5 years. And listen, I'm not going to, point the finger at this person or that person. The Browns have had some rotten luck here as well, right? I mean, at the moment where they thought that signing the franchise quarterback, to your point, Dave, was going to be the final piece that was going to get them over the top. Well, Deshaun Watson, aside from all the off the field stuff, and that's a whole separate subject. Aside from that, he suffers season-ending injuries the last 2 years. Nick Chubb suffers season-ending injuries the last 2 years. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who I could argue was playing better than anybody on that Browns defense at the time that he suffered a potentially career-threatening injury this past season. So, while, listen, the losses have mounted, there have been a lot of other things that have led us to this point. Now, to your point, though, Dave, about the contract, the Watson contract, it's beyond that. It's about not being able to find this franchise quarterback for now 25 years and counting. That's the biggest reason that we're in this predicament that we're in. The Haslams have made their mistakes. My God, we could spend 4 hours talking about the things that they've done wrong during their ownership tenure. But there's plenty to my point is that there's plenty of blame to be shared here. And I think, some of it has to fall on Myles Garrett as well.
Yeah. And to your point, Jimmy Haslam has made a ton of mistakes, but I think he's done so trying to bring it isn't been by cheaping it out. It's the opposite. He's thrown money to try to get to his he's trying to get to a Super Bowl. All right. I think getting a quarterback who can win and get you to respectability is probably the quickest way to make Myles Garrett see, okay, this might be something that happens. I'm going to go back to Kirk Cousins now. I'm not saying to trade for Kirk Cousins. Cousins is 83-74 as a starting quarterback. He's thrown 288 touchdowns, 126 picks in his 13-year career. Last year he got off to a great first half and then went off the cliff in the second half of the season. He recently talked about his health last year. Remember, he's coming off an Achilles injury, but it's something other than that in the second half of the year that affected him. Here's Kirk Cousins from Good Morning Football Overtime.
I think the Achilles healed well. I think there was a little bit of just trying to get my right ankle back around the Achilles, but the Achilles itself healed really well. And even then, we were 6-3, was playing well, doing a lot of good things, even if the right ankle wasn't perfect. Nobody's perfect in this league. We're never feeling 100%. So it didn't really affect me too much. But then against the Saints, got hit pretty good in my right shoulder and elbow. And from there, kind of dealing with that, was something I was working through and just never really could get it to where I wanted it. And so now that the season's over, you have the time and the energy to say, okay, let's get the right ankle back. Let's get the shoulder back. Let's get the elbow back. And if we can do that, feel like I got a new life ahead of me here in pro football.
Again, it explains the dive in the second half. And he wasn't willing to admit that. Even that we had a couple Falcons beat reporters on. He wouldn't admit that to the Falcons beat reporters. So that's not uncommon for quarterbacks. Nobody wants to admit they're hurt because defenders are going to start hitting you there then more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Kirk Cousins could be a nice option for the Browns. I mean, there's going to be plenty of options for the Browns going forward. He could be a nice bridge quarterback that we've talked about if that's the direction that they want to go. Obviously, with the number 2 pick in the draft, that doesn't come by very often, and that would give you a chance to maybe bring in the young, touted franchise quarterback that you're going to want to develop. But Kirk Cousins has a relationship with Kevin Stefanski. They know each other well. Like I still believe that Stefanski and this coaching staff can take any quarterback and make him a winner. I mean, look, they got great production out of Joe Flacco. They got great production out of Jameis Winston. Go right on down the line. They've done a good job with quarterbacks. It's just a matter of figuring out what this team needs right now. And if that's the bridge quarterback and a Kirk Cousins, a Geno Smith, Sam Darnold. I mean, and there's also the possibility now with this Garrett situation, and that you might be able to get your franchise quarterback through a trade for Myles Garrett. Wouldn't that be something? So I think there's plenty of options. I like Cousins. I've always liked Cousins. The way he carries himself, the way he plays. He's been a very productive quarterback in this league for a long time. Derek Carr's another guy you could throw into that list of guys that are, potentially these type of bridge guys that can get the Browns at least through 2025 and maybe another year beyond.
Tom Withers and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Are you ready? The Ohio Lottery is about to unleash 50 new millionaires on Ohio. Want a chance to become one? Play VIP Millions. With 50 $1 million winning tickets, it's your best chance to win $1 million ever.
We continue talking Browns with Tom Withers. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, it's Mike from West Virginia. I think anybody with common sense can figure out that Jimmy Haslam and Paul DePodesta are the reason for every single problem that we have. So here's what I'm having difficulties understanding. Why are all these sports heads and these fans saying that Andrew Berry should be fired and Kevin Stefanski should be fired when it's obvious to everybody that this whole mess is mainly Jimmy Haslam with Paul DePodesta sprinkled in all over the place on this? Because I'm a big fan of Berry and Stefanski, and I like how Kevin Stefanski's starting to take ownership of the team now and getting more bold with his press conferences.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Tom, when you end up with a season where you're 3-14 and you expected to be in the playoffs, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of blame to go around.
There is, and you can't fire the owner, right? You're kind of stuck with him, and obviously, he believes in Paul DePodesta, and as I mentioned before, the list of sins, if you will, of the Haslams in their first few years of ownership are well documented, and we could spend 14 hours talking about those, and finally the Haslams exhibited some patience. Once we got through those tough Hugh Jackson years and 1-31 and all of that stuff, Paul DePodesta comes along. They've made some good moves. They've made some bad ones. It's just kind of been a vicious cycle. And as I've mentioned before, they've had some bad luck on top of bad decisions. And when you have that, you're just going to continue to trip over your own feet. And that's exactly what's happened with the Browns. So I understand with the caller, how he feels. And I do agree with him as well. It feels like Kevin has been a little more, not outspoken necessarily, but a little bolder with, the way he's addressed some of the issues that have, plagued this team over the last year or two. I think Kevin has done a really good job here. I think that goes without saying as far as I'm concerned. And as far as Andrew Berry, listen, the track record in the drafts has not been good. You can go from, right on down the line from, Jedrick Wills to Greg Newsome. Unfortunately, I thought MJ Emerson kind of took a step back this year for whatever reason that I don't know if that was partially due to injuries or not. But there's been some other moves that look good at this point. I mean, you look at the Jerry Jeudy acquisition, which really helped this team this year. Amari Cooper, went from being the number one wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns to not even being on the field for the Buffalo Bills. So certainly the Browns identified something there in terms of making a move to get rid of Cooper at that time. So again, plenty of blame to go around, Dave. I just don't know where, all of it should fall. And, obviously I think the silence by Dee and Jimmy Haslam speaks volumes. I think they understand that, they were the ones behind the Watson move. And as you pointed out earlier, these are 6 degrees of separation to Deshaun Watson with everything that transpired this past year.
All right. So post Senior Bowl, Matt Miller, who is ESPN draft analyst, has the Titans taking Abdul Carter #1 overall in the draft process. And he has the Browns going with a non-quarterback at #2. This is from ESPN NFL Live.
You can get someone who can play 2 positions that are needs for you. They need a wide receiver opposite Jerry Jeudy. We see on defense the health of Denzel Ward is something they have to monitor consistently. The great thing with Hunter is he can do both those things for you. We'll see which position he plays primarily. I personally think he's a better wide receiver than he is corner prospect. They also make about double, which I would advise him to look into, but he is a difference maker. That's why he took home the Heisman this year, and it's why he should be one of the first picks this year.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that. To your point, he's 2 draft picks in one. You get a corner and a receiver, and I know people question whether or not he can do it at the next level. I think it'll be tough to be a full-time corner and a #2 receiver, but I do like him in that wide receiver 3, maybe 3.5, where he's in 11 personnel or 4 wide, getting about 30 to 40 snaps a game versus 60 to 70. It becomes a little bit much.
So, Tom, whoever takes Hunter, if it's the Browns, they have to have a plan for his development. You can't say you're a cornerback and a wide receiver. And I'll liken it so Browns fans understand where I'm going. JOK, they didn't put everything on his plate at once because he was kind of a hybrid. This guy's the ultimate hybrid, and you can overwhelm a really talented guy if you ask him to do too much too early.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have any Shohei Ohtanis here. I don't think we have any two-way players in the NFL, right? I mean, that was back in the day. Lou Groza could get away with that in the 1940s and 50s. That ain't happening now. So I tend to disagree with Miller. I thought when I watched Colorado this year, I thought Hunter was better on the defensive side than as a receiver. But, that's not up to me. That's up to somebody's pro personnel department to decide and a coaching staff to decide what he does best. But I think to your bigger point, Dave, is that there are numerous options here for the Browns at #2 if they decide to stay there. And obviously a trade is also something that they could do as well. And, Carter could still be there at 2. And depending on what you do with Garrett, that could be an option. Obviously, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, the 2 quarterbacks that have been identified. as the top of this class. If you fall in love with one of those guys, then you got to take him. I mean, I was talking to some people that were down at the Senior Bowl, and they were raving about how good Dylan Gabriel looked, the kid from Oregon, as a quarterback. And obviously, there's that next group of quarterbacks, Will Howard, Jackson Dart, that crew that could be available, beginning in the second round. So again, plenty of options for the Browns there at number 2. And to me, Travis Hunter would definitely be intriguing and somebody who I would seriously consider.
All right, when you look at the Browns, it was apparent that the offensive line had a tough season. Injuries, yeah, different scheme. The question I have for you, and I'm curious, you covered this team closely. Was it just a matter of different schemes, so you're asking guys to do things that weren't in their wheelhouse, their strengths, or did they just get old?
Yes and yes. I think both things can be true at the same time there. I think the offensive line is an issue going forward. We still don't know whether or not Joel Bitonio is going to be back for another season or not. From my understanding is he has not made up his mind yet. He wanted to get through the Pro Bowl, still have some conversations with his family and such before he comes to do a decision. And obviously, the left tackle situation has been a problem. The Jedrick Wills thing is obviously that experiment is over. DeJuan Jones, has shown us that he has the potential to be a long-time starter in this league. Unfortunately, again, and I'll go back to, bad circumstances, him suffering another season-ending injury just when you thought you could plug and play him in a new spot this year. So after he played right tackle last year. So listen, I thought Postage had his struggles this year. I think Wyatt Teller had a solid year. He seemed to kind of, get his feet under him, if you will. I think we forget too, Dave, and sometimes I don't think fans can appreciate, and I know it's difficult for media. Sometimes we don't know what these guys are dealing with from a medical standpoint. The team they can tell us that some guy's got an ankle problem and that's keeping him out of practice for a couple of days, but all these guys are dealing with something. And I think this group as a whole was pretty banged up for a lot of this year. I'll go back to Conklin for a second. I thought he had a terrific year and a real bounce back comeback year for Jack. He played well, and I thought Bitonio got himself together and played really well down the stretch, which is why I think he's considering coming back. There was never any talk about, Joel being washed by any means. I think he's still got some productive years, but it's definitely a need, which is why I think you saw the Browns take Zach Zinter last year. They knew that this was going to be a problem going forward. And then, until while you're looking for the quarterback, you're going to have some guys out there to protect for them and to open some holes. So listen, I think offensive line is one of numerous needs on this team. I don't think there's a position group that doesn't need some help.
Tom Withers and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit more Browns. We'll also talk a little Cavs. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking with Tom Withers. Take a look. This is from the 33rd team. So those are former personnel and NFL executive types. It's one player each team should go after this offseason. For the Browns, they say left tackle, Ronnie Stanley. Browns were hopeful that Jedrick Wills would be the long-term answer at left tackle. That hasn't happened. It feels like the window is closed there. Stanley would be a good option for Cleveland, especially after seeing him up close and personal in the AFC North. They say 3 years at $60 million, so $20 million a year for Stanley is the projected contract. I don't mind that. I do think they probably need a left tackle. I don't know. That might be a little rich, the $20 million for a left tackle, although it's a premium position.
Definitely a guy that you'd have to look at depending on what you're deciding to do there. Again, I'll go back to DeJuan Jones. I think we've seen enough to think that you can plug him in on the left side if that's the way you want to go. If he can stay healthy, if he can keep his weight down, I still think that's an option. As far as Stanley's concerned, I mean, yeah, we've seen him plenty in the AFC North. He's done a nice job. I'm not sure the Ravens are going to be willing to let him go so easily. I don't know what their plans are going forward, but that's obviously, again, another area that you got to circle on that roster of, vitally important to get right going forward.
So the NBA trade deadline tomorrow at 3 o'clock. The Cavs have been mentioned, attached to a couple of guys. DeAndre Hunter is one guy for the Hawks. Another name that some have attached to the Cavs is Cam Johnson. Seems to be a fan favorite. Team is still 4.5 games ahead of the Celtics as the top team in the Eastern Conference, one of the best records in all of basketball rather. Tom, do you think they make a trade before the trade deadline? And it's a tough question because if you think you legitimately have a chance at an NBA title, which I think the Cavs do based on how they played, you got to look at all the options, and they clearly could use a big wing that can play some defense.
Yeah, and that was reinforced last night against the Boston Celtics, wasn't it, Dave? Yep. Yeah, I mean, listen, we've been talking about that for 3 or 4 years with the Cavs. Unfortunately, with Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade being out, that's going to limit your options when you go against a Celtic team. I thought Kenny Atkinson maybe should have played a little more zone defense than he did last night, but that's for another segment. In terms of the Cavs and making a move, they're definitely talking to some teams. There's been some talks between them and the Hawks about DeAndre Hunter, who would be a nice acquisition. He fits the profile. I would not be so willing to part with Caris LeVert personally. I think he does a nice job. I think he showed last year in the playoffs how valuable he can be to that second unit. Now that's not to say that group hasn't changed because of the way Kenny Atkinson is coaching the reserves compared to the way JB Bickerstaff handled his bench last year. That's a whole other deal. But I think, Dave, what you got to think about with this team, which is 40-10 now, which has played ball as well as anybody in the league, you've got a great thing going. You've got great chemistry in that locker room. You've got great chemistry on the floor. I'm not sure you want to mess with it. That's not to say that, the addition of one of those guys couldn't help you maybe get over the top, but I wouldn't fix it. I wouldn't, try to monkey with it right now too much because I think things are going so well. And I'd just be afraid of the addition of whoever it might be, whether it's Caris LeVert and a package of guys. I think it'd come back and bite you. I think things are going so well right now. I would just not mess with it.
Along those lines, Jared Allen was asked after last night's game, does he think that the Cavs have enough, and his thoughts on the possibility of a trade?
I mean, if you take away somebody, especially somebody in the locker room, a locker room presence, it's going to disrupt it. That's just the end of the day. We're all close to each other, but as you know, that's how things go.
Do you believe you have enough in this locker room already to reach the goals that you set out for?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every single night we go out there, even if we're missing people, I feel like we have enough to win every single night.
And again, it's tough to argue with that. 40-10. They fell behind, I think it was 15 at the end of one and got it to 4 in the fourth without, as you mentioned, a couple of their guys.
Yeah, and, Evan Mobley has been struggling as well. He hasn't been himself here for about the last week or so. I still think he's dealing with some issues from that calf injury that kept him out for 4 games. And he wasn't good against Dallas on Sunday, and he was really bad last night. He just didn't seem to have any lift on his shot or an explosiveness. And I just think something is still bothering him with that calf. Dave, as I mentioned before, the chemistry is so good on this team. And, you guys see that sometimes in some of these clips, and from being there firsthand, the vibe in the locker room is terrific. It's as good as with any team that I've ever seen here in Cleveland. These guys genuinely like each other. They're always kind of, there's always some joking going on. Somebody's always giving somebody a hard time, and it doesn't seem to be for show. I mean, I think these guys are genuinely connected on and off the court. And I think that's got a lot to do with Donovan Mitchell and his leadership. I think a lot of it has to do with Kenny Atkinson and just the way he relates to players. He constantly talks about the lessons he learned coaching with Steve Kerr and kind of the culture that they built in Golden State. And he inherited a good one here. some of the credit, a lot of the credit has to go to JB Bickerstaff for what they've built here in Cleveland. And, as I said before, I think you can toy with the roster a little bit, but I wouldn't be too dramatic or drastic when it comes to the trading deadline coming up tomorrow.
So it sounds like you'd be more in favor of the buyout. So after the trade deadline, there will be another where some veterans asked to get bought out. That means you kind of can add them, and then you kind of take somebody from the back end of the roster and tweak it.
Yeah, and it's low risk, right? And I think we've seen the Cavs do that before. I mean, the buyout market has helped them. There's also been times where it hasn't worked. The Andrew Bogut, 43 seconds of a Cavs career, I think it was. So that market is always going to be there. And listen, I think Cavs fans should feel really good about the way the team is gelling, how young the team is, how the contracts are lined up favorably over the next several years. They've got that core four. I think we've now come to realize that, yes, Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell can play together. Yes, Evan Mobley and Jared Allen can be on the court at the same time and not get in each other's way. So, there's a lot to look forward to with this team, and should be a fun second half of the season.
Tom Withers, as always, great stuff. Thanks so much for the time. Always enjoy talking to you. Thanks, Tom.
Dave, my pleasure. Thank you.
Tom Withers, always really good and insightful stuff relative to Cleveland sports teams, has been covering them for a long time. We're going to step aside, go back to the Browns, and we'll hear more from Myles Garrett. Damon, Wolfe, Dawgs by Nature, straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Are you ready? The Ohio Lottery is about to unleash 50 new millionaires on Ohio. Want a chance to become one? Play VIP Millions. With 50 $1 million winning tickets, it's your best chance to win $1 million ever.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Myles Garrett, his first interview since requesting a trade from the Browns down at the Super Bowl in New Orleans with Rich Eisen, who asked him what teams he was targeting with the trade request.
I know in my position I don't have much say in where I go, but hopefully we can leave off on good terms, and we can find a middle ground between us.
And so do you have some teams in mind that you would like to go to?
I mean, there are definitely contenders on the AFC side and NFC side. I'm not, glued to anyone at the certain moment. But like I said, I just want to be in a position to, to play in those big games and win big games, and feel like I can make a meaningful impact and elevate a team and take them over the top.
Let's welcome in Damon Wolfe, Dawgs by Nature, and Damon. The Myles Garrett situation for the Browns keeps getting more and more complicated.
Yeah, it sure does, Dave. Him being down there on Radio Row this week is certainly not looking good for the Browns.
No, and it's going to be more and more interesting as we hear things come out. He when asked about coming back, he said he realizes he may not get traded. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. A guy who Browns fans have kind of connected him to is Hall of Famer Joe Thomas. Thomas spent his entire career with the Browns, and they really weren't able to help him get even to the playoffs. He was asked about the Myles Garrett trade request. This from ESPN Cleveland.
They're only going to get better value if it comes to the point where they have to trade him. If they've already said, we're not going to trade him, it doesn't matter if it's 2 first-round picks. They're kind of putting their line in the sand saying, hey, everybody knows there's a value for everybody. I mean, if somebody came today and said 4 first-round picks, it'd probably be a done deal. But you got to understand, even Patrick Mahomes, they would trade him for 10 first-round picks. Like, there's a price on everybody. We just got to explore and figure out what it is.
Truth.
So the fact
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, like, they've said that they're not going to trade Myles. Yeah, they don't want to trade Myles, but if he says, I'm not going to play unless you trade me, they better have created the best market possible to get the most value from him, because whether he's here or somewhere else, he's a tremendously valuable asset.
And Damon, he did not say he wouldn't play here today when Rich Eisen followed up with the question. So it's interesting. I know you wrote an article before Garrett's trade request. Do you think the Browns have kind of gone all in on a rebuild? Have they committed to a rebuild?
I'm not sure if they've, in their minds, if they think it's a rebuild, but I think that obviously with Myles wanting out now, I think that what the plan that was presented to him and kind of reflected in his comments there with Rich Eisen today as well, looks like that, in his opinion, it's more of a rebuild than he wants to wade through. And, it's interesting. It certainly seems like he is committed to getting out of Cleveland, even though he did not say that, he wouldn't play if he was forced to. But, right now we're just kind of in the middle of a muddy PR game going on from both sides, I think. The Browns certainly probably don't want to make a trade. The thing that's interesting to me is, Myles at the end of the season, if you watch the last clip of the Hard Knocks where the Browns were actually featured in the show, it was focused on Myles Garrett and kind of, him exiting that day, the last day of the season as they're cleaning out the lockers and that kind of stuff. And he seemed like he was kind of on board at that point to come back. So, it's really interesting to me what has taken place over the last couple of weeks, because I think that, obviously the Browns have known for at least a couple of weeks here. And the only thing that I can really think of is that, a moment that happened was, the hiring of Tommy Rees. And I don't know if, that satisfied Myles. But, that's a question that I certainly have. And I would like to have somebody ask him that. But it's clear that he just isn't, in favor of the plan that they presented to him. And it's going to be, a situation to watch over the next few weeks until March.
Yeah, you got to do some roster building, and you're constricted by the Deshaun Watson contract. So you're going to have to find a way to renegotiate that. And if you renegotiate that pushes the cap hit back even further. That's why they can't really trade him before June 1st. It's another $36 million dead cap hit on top of the Deshaun Watson dead cap. Every time you renegotiate and push things into the future, it comes back when you trade them as a dead cap hit. So that's kind of very simplistic, but think in terms of that if you're a fan, because that's what's happening. Andrew Berry has some pressure on him. He's got to build some veterans. He's got to go out and get some veterans that Myles Garrett says, I see where you're going with this at this point. I think.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think there's a lot of pressure on Andrew Berry, and maybe that's Myles' intention here with putting in the trade request is, he wants to hold their feet to the fire here in free agency and see what they can do. And, I think maybe he would possibly evaluate what they do over the first couple of days of free agency and see if there's any kind of plan there that kind of works for him. But we will certainly see and find out soon enough. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. If they do trade him, they would have to make a lot of things work, or adjust a lot of things, and that picture isn't too pretty for the Browns for next season. Effectively, it's a negative. They'd be negative $16 million on the cap if they trade Garrett. But they would have to do other things like restructure players or possibly even cut guys, veterans on the team. So it's certainly something to watch moving forward.
Yeah, they have to become cap compliant, I believe is the term that they use. All right. You wrote another article, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the rookies and the draft and more about Myles Garrett. Do you think Cooper Kupp is a guy, if you go out and you sign Cooper Kupp, is that a guy that helps appease Myles Garrett?
Yeah, it's an idea. It's something I wrote about the other day when the Cooper Kupp news broke as well on the same day. I think that would be one piece, but you would also have to, I don't know if it moves the needle enough. You would also have to bring in, land some kind of veteran quarterback to go along with it, to kind of, I think for Myles to be able to buy into that situation. But it is a possibility. He's a veteran. He's had some injury issues, so there are some negatives there. But his actual salary cap, wouldn't hurt the Browns too much. I think they could probably do it as long as they could figure out a way to, sign Myles to an extension, which I think was their original plan. And, that was really going to help them free up some cap if they could do that.
Yeah, and again, we're going to talk about it again. They're going to be pushing more money in the back, which when you trade someone, it becomes dead cap. So it'll be interesting, and there are no easy answers. If I'm Myles Garrett, I think you look at that defense, and he has to see the potential there. I mean, you've got Ward, you've got a lot of young guys on that line that are pretty talented. You look at the offense, and that needs a lot of work. It needs playmakers.
It really does, and I think that was his main emphasis and a lot of his talking points at the end of the season. He wanted to know if the offense was going to be able to score enough points to compete and make deep playoff runs, and that's something. And unfortunately, because of the Deshaun Watson contract and situation, there are no easy answers. Andrew Berry can't wave a magic wand and make a quarterback appear out of thin air. There aren't that many veteran options that are available that you look at. And, in the draft, unfortunately, this is not the best year for the Browns to be picking at the top.
Damon Wolfe from Dawgs by Nature and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. We'll continue talking Browns. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Full Court Action is a half hour devoted exclusively to men's and women's basketball from across the Mid-American Conference. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Bacon. Join me at 6:30 Tuesday nights, and we'll meet the coaches and players from the Mid-American Conference who are making an impact in basketball. Full Court Action will spotlight the top plays and performances from all across the Mid-American Conference with some historical action as well. Catch Full Court Action Tuesday nights at 6:30 on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. We continue talking Browns with Damon Wolfe from Dawgs by Nature, Daniel Jeremiah, draft analyst from NFL Network, talking about what the Browns could get potentially in a Myles Garrett trade and who he might end up with.
I think you get 2 ones, and then maybe there's maybe if it's a team that's picking in the back of the first round, maybe it's this year's one, next year's one plus a little something extra, maybe a player, another pick. I don't think you can get 3 ones, but I think you can get 2. And if you're picking at the bottom, which if he wants to go to a winner, I would imagine, they would do their best to try and accommodate him from that standpoint. So there will be a lot of teams picking at the back of the draft be interested in that one.
Washington? I mean, that's the one that just keeps leaping at me because he checks a box of that they're on the rise. It checks a box for the Browns that they get him out of conference. You know, Detroit obviously checks that box too. So those are a couple that just leap to mind on that front.
NFC side, I mean, 100%. I would make a case.
Rams? Do you think the Rams could? I mean,
they don't really need him. It's crazy to say it, but their young D line is so good. I mean, they're so cheap. I just that was the first thing I thought of as soon as I saw that he was like, well, Les probably already texted him because he's so aggressive. But I'm looking at their team, and I mean, he's got one of the best defensive lines in the NFL right now, and they're young and cheap.
And he's referring to Les Snead, who's the GM of the Rams. Damon, again, the issue with it is there's a $36 million dead cap hit on top of the Deshaun Watson cap money that's going to be counted against the cap.
Yeah, for sure. It certainly makes it difficult. And if the Browns do trade him, I mean, they're definitely kind of definitely in rebuild mode. I think that there's a real possibility that the Browns could play next season without Myles Garrett, without Nick Chubb, without Joel Bitonio. And that's a totally different, that to lose all those guys in 1 year would be totally insane, if we were to think that last year. But it's a real possibility if, they can't come to some kind of agreement with Myles and get him plugged back in.
Yep, and again, they could extend them and get the contract down so it would mitigate the cap hit, and you can spread it over a couple. There are things they can do. I don't know that it helps them to do that. All right, this you wrote an article, 5 players from the Senior Bowl that could help transform the Browns. We'll take a look at a couple of them, as many as we have time allowed. You've got Mason Taylor, tight end from LSU. And when you look at that, the projected draft selection for him is 3rd round. What did you see from Taylor?
Yeah, I really like Taylor. I think you can play him in line and split him out as well. He's actually more impressive as a route runner than I thought. And he really improved in that area, I think, this year. He has really plucky hands, and he can kind of pluck the ball on the run. So a good pass catcher, and I think what makes him attractive to the Browns is that I think he gives you a lot more than some of the other guys in the blocking game.
All right, another guy is Essery, offensive tackle from Minnesota. It's Ariante Essery. What'd you see from him?
Yeah, he's a really solid, big. And the thing I really like about him is he's a true left tackle in this class. There aren't a lot of those, and most of the top guys that are being talked about are kind of tweeners. Will they play tackle? Will they play guard at the next level? But Essery is definitely a tackle. He anchors very well. He played great down at the Senior Bowl, and I think he's a guy that could be on the rise, and definitely probably more of a top 50 pick in this draft. So if the Browns could maneuver somewhere to get him, I don't know if 33 is a little too rich, but if they could get him somewhere in that 2nd round, that would be great.
Another one, quarterback, and you have him potentially going in the 2nd round at pick 33, is Jackson Dart, quarterback from Ole Miss. What'd you see from him? He's a guy that he intrigues me. When I've seen him play a couple of times for Ole Miss. One of them was the bowl game, and I watched it, and it was like he's throwing the ball it's lateral passes, and then he kills it over the middle of the field, but there's not intermediate to the numbers. It's just a very gimmicky type offense for Lane Kiffin.
Yeah, the Ole Miss offense is certainly one that isn't very, pro style. Definitely more of a college offense of system. I think he's got potential. He's an interesting guy. He's definitely more of a project though, so, he doesn't really help us out too much next season, but down the road, could he be a guy that develops into a solid starter? The potential is there, but, that will be up to, Stefanski and Tommy Rees to be able to develop a quarterback like that. And, the jury's still out on that.
All right. Another guy that you have is a wide receiver, Jalen Noel, wide receiver from Iowa State. You have him projected 3rd round, which would be 94th for the Browns. What'd you see from him? What'd you like?
Yeah, he's a guy that I really, really like. He can play. He's a little bit smaller build, but he plays a lot bigger than his size. And I think you can put him in a slot. He can play outside. When I watch him, it's hard for me not to see a little bit of Steve Smith in him. He's physical, aggressive, and he's got a little bit of juice and can run. And he's a great route runner.
Damon Wolfe from Dawgs by Nature. Appreciate the time and the insight. Great stuff. Thanks very much, Damon.
No problem. Thanks, Dave.
Damon Wolfe, make sure you check him out. Dawgs by Nature, always really good Browns analysis, especially relative to the draft. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.